Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm going to be doing the patch 14.5 notes. So if you enjoy the content, like, subscribe, and let's get into it. This is a relatively large patch. They are nerfing down a decent pool of junglers. They're also nerfing down some of the more oppressive top laners, Twisted Fate, Vayne, Zac being a few of them. On the system side of things, we're seeing nerfs towards some of the strong items. Lichbane is really overperforming for mages at the moment. Solstice Slay is really strong on a lot of supports. And then buffing up some of the weaker support items, Dreammaker, Celestial Opposition. On the skin side of things, it's more of a filler patch, only 3 skins, which are project in this one. But yeah, moving on. So Belveth is very strong in elite solo queue at the moment. She doesn't see a huge amount of pro presence and tends to be a bit weaker in low elo, but as she is very oppressive in elite, they are tapping her down. They are kind of targeting nerfs towards her E. My problem with Belveth is the fact that she is supposed to be like this scaling monster, really synergizes with like attack speed and being able to really quickly melt down targets. But at the moment, in her current state, she's very much focused around the early game. She has very strong dueling capabilities there. Her W is a really powerful tool from the moment you have a point in it. And like the scaling aspect of her kit is kind of just it doesn't have enough of an impact to really be that noticeable. Which is why she has ended up being kind of like the master Yi of high elo, if anything. But like more focused towards early game skew. Overall, yeah, nerfs towards her E. I imagine it will do a bit to kind of put her as a more balanced option in elite. Where she ends up lying after this, yeah, it'll just be a bit weaker, but a bit of damage reduction just makes her a bit more squishy. Brand is going to have his passive buffed for monster damage. This is to try and keep Brand's jungle relevant without over-nerfing him with the R nerfs, which are here. His R is going to go from 100 to 300 damage to 100 to 250, and the cooldown is going to go up by 5 seconds early, 15 seconds late. This is a nerf targeted towards mid and support Brand, whilst trying to keep jungle Brand relevant. Overall, I imagine jungle Brand will still be what we mostly see in like elite play. This won't suddenly fix his low elo skew for like his other roles, but definitely will do a bit of a tap down. This is a relatively large ultimate nerf. Eve is going to have her Q AP ratio reduced by 5%. This hurts her quite a bit. This combined with Lichbane nerfs should be a decent power down. She is also very strong in elite play, kind of similar to Belveth. Doesn't see pro play. She's very much a solo Q skewed pick. But yeah, 5% AP ratio down on an ability which can hit 4 times, combined with the fact that she wants like an early Medjais, should do a lot to nerf her down. I imagine this could be anywhere from 1 to 3% win rate. Really depends on like how the rest of the patch plays out. Jarvan is getting some big buffs here. He is gaining 0.4 armor growth, which is nice. It allows him to be a bit more durable as a frontline option. And his Q, which is the big one here, is going to have 2 seconds shaved off of it at later ranks. This is a revert to the nerf he received last season when Spirit of Shojin was performing really well on him. Does this suddenly put Jarvan in a spot where I imagine he will see a lot of play? I'm pretty sure it will. He does see some competitive, not a huge amount, but there is definitely play there. I imagine this will put him in a spot where he could be one of the most contested picks. In solo queue, I imagine it will make him a good pick. Not meta, I don't believe, but like definitely a solid option there. Kayn is going to have some adjustments, trying to buff up his Darken form without promoting the idea of building lethality on it. The Darken bonus healing is going to go from 25% to 25% with a 0.5% per 100 bonus health scalar. And the R is going to have Darken form healing, 65% of damage dealt to 75% of damage dealt. Overall, these are buffs towards the lethality variant. When you are picking things up like Edge of Night, this will do a decent amount for this. This does buff the idea of building Edge of Night on Red Kayn, but it does primarily focus on the idea of building for like health items on Red Kayn. Do I think it will suddenly fix that skew? Probably not, but it definitely does promote that idea. Kog'Maw is going to have his movement speed increased on his passive to allow it to more frequently catch up to its enemies. The Q is now going to have a cast time which matches his auto attack frame, so this should be feel a lot nicer to use. Void Ooze, the slow is going to go up from 30 to 50 to 40 to 60. This is a nice AP Kog'Maw buff as he primarily maxes his ability first. It also incentivizes putting 1 point in this ability because I know a lot of people still do skip points in E, as it tends to be less it just tends to be less optimal than having more points in W and Q, as they tend to be better stat checky abilities. And his R is going to gain 10% bonus AD ratio, which is nice. It promotes the idea of building some AD on this champion when you are going like the marksman variant builds. Does this suddenly put Cogmore in a spot where I imagine he will be played a lot more? Probably not. Cogmore isn't bad if you pick him for the reasons you want to pick him, like as like a hyper carry, kind of like funnel champion. This doesn't really buff that playstyle up a lot more. It's just a lot of quality of life things. It is strictly buffs though, so he will probably gain a decent amount of win rate from it. But he should still be a relatively similar champion. Maokai is going to be losing 5 bonus base movement speed, which is big for Maokai. It's one of the main things about this champion. It's just how mobile he wants to be. Building movement speed has always been the way you want to play Maokai. Trailblazer, Deadmans, Swifties have always been very valuable on him. The Q damage is going to go up by 40 early on against monsters, as they want to keep jungle Maokai relevant. And the W is going to receive a 1 second nerf at all ranks. I imagine Maokai will stay as a relatively strong support. Will it push him up the AP tier? Maybe. He might drop down to the S tier, but he will still definitely be around there. He's still very simple to play. And honestly, play jungle Maokai. I imagine it will stay very power neutral, and if you want somewhere else to play him, it's a solid role. Nilly is going to be losing 5 base movement speed, and she's going to be having 10% damage taken off her Q marked targets. I'm kind of disappointed in the way they've gone about nerfing Nilly here. I would have rather they stripped back some of the buffs they gave towards her E last patch, or the patch before, as they were just too much. The AP ratio is what I recommend they should have gone after first, as that is the main kind of snowball elite lever, whereas keeping her E as a relevant ability is definitely something which I imagine they want to do. Overall, I'm not so much of a fan of this direction, but yeah, she's strong in elite, so these are elite levers. They are kind of like focused on more of her like landing an ability into another ability, and more of her map mobility. Overall, yeah, it's a good nerf, but probably the wrong way of going about it. Rek'Sai is receiving a bunch of quality of life changes. She came out as an utter mess last patch. They really should have like kept her on the PBE for another patch longer before pushing it, as it just wasn't in a healthy spot to release. The main things here is like her attacks should feel a lot nicer to use, both in base and Q, and she is receiving a buff towards her E damage and her R damage, which should also allow her to be a bit more of a damage option when she's going like these bruiser tankier builds. I believe lethality is still performing as her best option, which is kind of unfortunate, as I know they don't want that to be the way she functions, and whether they do end up converting like another one of her damage options into like magic might be some sort of route they go, but yeah, for the most part, try both lethality and bruisables next patch. I imagine she should be in a very strong spot, maybe not like OP, but like definitely decent. Senna Q bonus AD ratio is going down by 10%, which is a good change. Senna is very much performing well in both the ADC and the support role, as like a fasting option, as a supportive option, as a carry option. You can kind of go down different routes. She sees a lot of pro play, which is why this is a good change. Do I suddenly think this pushes her out of the meta? Once again, probably not, but I'm more of a fan of this than balance rushing, where we go after like huge amounts of nerfs and then Senna ends up in like a weak spot for like the rest of the season, as that's something they have done in the past. Seraphine is receiving a bunch of changes, trying to push her more towards being a support who can max each one of her abilities. I'm not going to cover all these changes, but yeah, the main thing here is minion damage is down, her kind of like power between abilities should be up, and her mana regeneration is now much more focused around having the support item and being able to utilize that. Sivir is getting 4 base armor, which is probably enough to make her see pro presence within solo queue. I don't imagine this will be enough though. She is still a champion you kind of just want to play alongside an enchanter to kind of scale throughout the game, as her main kind of selling factor is the fact that she has access to a lot of wave clear and she can just enable scalers. If you want to play something safe, then Sivir is a great option. If you're looking for something to carry, I'd recommend more other options like Zeri or Jinx, but Sivir is still not a bad option for that. If you are able to get your items, she still does decent damage. Smolder, however, is also like another one where you are more of a hyper carry, and you do have access to a lot more damage later on into the game, especially with his Q, which does a huge amount of true damage, which I believe they are adjusting this patch, so let's cover this. So 6.5% of target's maximum health is going to be plus 2% AD, plus 1% AP, and 0.8% of Dragon Patience stacks of target's maximum health, so this should once again be more of a scaling factor into later on into the game, combined rather than just being a flat 6.5%. His E is going to have 5 to 10 bolts based on critical strike chance to 5 plus 1 per 50 Dragon Patience stacks. Once again, pushing him more towards scaling, less towards the kind of crit focus builds. His R is going to be gaining, his R is going to be losing flat damage, going from 225 to 475 to 200 to 400. The sweet spot damage increase multiplier is going to be going from 30% to 50%. And the self heal is going to be going from 10 to 110 to 210. To 100 to 170, but it is going to be gaining a 50% bonus AD ratio, incentivizing AD builds. Frame data on basic attacks has been adjusted to better match Smolder's animation, which is a nice change. It should feel better to play him. Overall, these are once again changes focused more towards the late game. I'm not a huge fan of this champion. I think he kind of encourages very degenerate playstyles in like the 225 stacks and just becoming an execute bot. Not a huge fan. I hope he doesn't see much pro play, as he is kind of being picked up quite significantly there at the moment. I hope these changes kind of push him out of that, but we'll have to see. Overall, I imagine these changes will be very neutral. If anything, just kind of incentivizes degenerate playstyle. Twisted Fate, very strong at the moment in top lane, mid lane, ADC. He is like number 1 almost in every single one of these roles. Number 2, joint kind of number 1 with Vayne, if anything, in the top lane. But yeah, bonus attack speed going from 10 to 60 to 10 to 50. Bonus damage is going to be having its AD ratio stripped by 55%, which is a huge nerf. This should definitely hit AD Twisted Fate a decent amount. I imagine both top lane and bot lane should be hit significantly by this, and I imagine it'll put him down towards like an A tier, B tier pick, as these are relatively large nerfs. Vayne is very oppressive within the top lane at the moment, so her bonus movement speed of her passive is going to be going down by 15, and her tumble, her Q is going to have its cooldown go from 4 to 2 to 6 to 2. Overall, not a fan of the direction they've taken with these changes, as you tend to see Q max Vayne being the way you want to play her in the top lane a lot of the time. Although I have seen some people kind of go back towards those WMAX builds, I imagine this will once again re-incentivize putting like 3 points, 4 or 5 points into Q. We'll have to see. But yeah, overall, this is incentivizing like those the one-hit builds with like Flea, Essence, or even Stormrazor, as it's more of a nerf towards the early game of Q. Veigar is getting buffs. He is performing pretty poorly at the moment, just in general. His AP ratio on Q is going to go from 45 to 65 to 50 to 70%. And the R cooldown is going to go down by 20 seconds early onto the game. That is a relatively large change. Combined with a bit more damage on Q, should put him in a better spot. Helps with last hitting. Helps, I mean, it's strictly just 5% throughout the game on his first max ability. Overall, yeah, should be really nice towards Veigar, especially like level 9-ish, where he should be dealing a lot of damage and being able to use his ult more frequently. Maybe we'll start seeing some like ultimate Hunter Veigars, where he's just spamming his ultimate, as it does a huge amount of damage if you're able to hit a target with both Q and W. Vex is going to be gaining some power, as she is performing pretty badly at the moment. Once again, Vex is a bit of a weird champion, as she is very strong against selective units, which is very much the design intent with the anti-dash mechanic. Yasuo, Yone, Aurelia come to mind. But like against other matchups, she does tend to struggle. This is even more incentivizing her ability to just counter these matchups. So her damage is going to go from 30 to 140 with a 20% AP ratio to 40 to 150 with a 25% AP ratio, really punishing those dash champions, and killing units with Looming Darkness now grants Doom and Gloom passive refund, which is a very nice change, and now enables her to have it up more often. Wukong is receiving a bunch of, it's a nice change. Should definitely help with his ability to skirmish with people. So number of stacks is going to go from 10 to 5%. Amplification per stack is going to go from 50% to 100%. And stack fall off rate is going to go from all at once to one at a time. So he's going to be able to maintain uptime on this ability a lot more, whilst having his stacks be more effective sooner into fights. Overall, yeah, this should be a really nice amount of power towards Wukong's skirmishing, especially against AD matchups where the armor on his passive is a lot more influential. But yeah, overall we have to see where this lands him, but a relatively large buff should be both good in the jungle and in the top lane. Yorick is receiving a bunch of changes here to try and encourage less obnoxious one-shot with E builds, where you can utilize the passive damage combined with the E amp damage to just chunk someone out. The damage on this is going to go from 30% to 20%, and Maiden's armor is going to go from 10 to 50 based on level to 30 to 90 based on level, but Maiden no longer reduces area of effect damage by 50%, makes Maiden a bit more easier to kill if your champion is very reliant on AoE abilities. Tooltip now clarifies that Maiden takes 70% less damage from lane minions, and bug fix, Maiden's 1 to 3% maximum health damage no longer bypasses evasion like Shen's W, blind, dodge, and evasion all work appropriately against the rest of Maiden's attacks. Yeah, this is overall I'd probably say this is a nerf to Yorick. He is performing very well once again in low elo. But yeah, in elite he's still gonna struggle. The changes are more focused towards like late game Yorick, with Maiden being a bit more tanky, but Maiden is still going to be killed by the same champions. The champions which would have struggled against Maiden are still going to struggle, so it's not like a huge change. Zac W is just going to have its damage decrease from 35 to 95 to 40 to 80. So, a bit more damage level 1 on the ability, but a decent chunk of damage lost on the ability later on. This is mainly to nerf down top lane Zac, which maxes W first, compared to jungle Zac, which maxes E first. This is probably the right direction to go with these changes. They were planning on nerfing his heal on the PB, but yeah, this is a good route to go if you are looking to just straight up nerf top lane Zac, whilst buffing up keeping jungle fairly power neutral. So items Celestial Opposition is performing pretty poorly at the moment. I believe it is the worst of the support options. It is having its cooldown reduced from 20 to 18 seconds. The slow duration is going to go up from 1.5 to 2 seconds, and the slow strength is going to go from 50% to 60%. Dreammaker is going to have its power kind of pushed towards scaling, so 140 is going to become 75 to 255 based on levels 6 to 18. The damage is going to go from 90 to 50 to 170, levels 6 to 18. Should be a relatively large power buff towards the item, especially for champions like Soraka and Senna, which should be two of the main abusers of this. Frozen Heart is going to have its price increased by 100 gold, and its armor reduced by 5. Overall, they could have done the first nerf here, and I imagine it would have been enough, but the item has been a big topic for a while now, which is why they're probably, I imagine that's why they're hitting it twice. Overall, Frozen Heart, I imagine, will stay as a fine option. Other armor options just aren't performing to the same level. Maybe we start seeing a switch over towards Randuin's Omen, and Sunfire's as that is being buffed this patch. Heartsteel is having its proc bonus damage go from 100 plus 10% bonus health from items to 80 plus 12% bonus health from items. Overall, pushing more of its damage towards scaling, once again, is a low elo skewed change. This item is very low elo skewed already, with like users like Tahm Kench, Mundo, Shen to a degree. Yeah, that's not changing here, so I imagine it will stay, once again, low elo skewed. Leviathan, the Ornn upgrade, is also going to have its stat line nerfed to the same amount, or changed to the same amount, 100 down to 80, 10% to 12%, but it is having a bug fix which originally gave it 25 ability haste when the item doesn't actually have ability haste, so this is a nerf down to the Ornn upgrade. Solstice Slay is the biggest winner of this patch in the support item department. It is having its cooldown increased from 20 to 30 seconds. The bonus health is going to go from 7% of maximum health to 50 to 230 scaling, which should be a nerf. The bonus movement speed is going down from 30% to 25%, and the item tracker flavor text has been updated. This is a big nerf to Maokai, which is its main abuser. But the item overall was just overperforming, so it is good to see some nerfs come towards it. Shojin is going to have some changes. Our goal with these Shojin changes is to make it synergize better with champions that should be primary users of the items, so these should help move it in the right direction for these champions. Note this change was implemented in patch 14.4. Okay, so this was implemented last patch. Spells now only grant 1 stack per cast, up to 1 per second for spells that deal damage over time. Attack-based spells now add a stack and get the damage improved by the spell amp. Damage from champions passive should no longer grant stacks of focus will. So yeah, some changes here. Sunfire is going to have 50 more health added to the item, as it is performing pretty poorly at the moment, and the immolate base damage is going to go from 12 to 15. So the main champions to focus on here are the likes of Shen, Sion, Cho'Gath maybe if he ends up picking up this item. Shen, Sion, Cho'Gath, Tarm, Ornn. I believe those are the main ones, and then like Mundo as well, actually, and then some jungle tanks. Might see like Sejuani and Mumu pick up this item more often now. The health does definitely help with Sejuani. I imagine you'll still sit on Barmies and then opt into other items in competitive, but as like a solo queue option, Sunfire's definitely is a lot more appealing now. On the AP Assassins item side of things, Lichbane is going to have its AP reduced by 5%. It's overperforming at the moment, so this is a good change. Storm Surge underperforming at the moment, going to be gaining 3 bonus movement speed. I'm not a huge fan of the direction they've taken with this change. I'd rather they gave the item more damage, as it is kind of like the main damage item for these champions, and I'm not a huge fan of movement speed creep in the game at the moment. Hextech Rocket Belt is going to have its price go up by 100, but the ability power is going to go up by 10, which is a buff towards the item and some of the users of it. ARAM balance changes, a bunch of bug fixes and quality of life changes, and then the 3 new skins, Project Gangplank, Project Jax, and Project Neferi. Overall, it'll be interesting to see how this patch goes. For top lane, I'm definitely going to be trying out Wukong, seeing how that feels alongside the Heartsteel changes, seeing if that puts the champions which want to use it in a good spot. There are lots of good nerfs in this patch. Vayne, Twisted Fate were very much needing nerfs. Eve and Bel'Veth and Lily, all 3 of those are really good for elite SKU changes. And overall, decent buffs as well to some champions which are definitely struggling. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.